Braking is a key area of the track to get working correctly if you hope to make improvements to your riding overall, something that many newcomers to the track will struggle with. In this video, we're going to talk specifically about the more common approach to braking that learning riders display, how that negatively affects them, and what you can do to flip it on its head and start making big progress in this area. As I've talked about in the past, your braking effort is more than just hitting a braking point, slamming on the anchors until you reach your entry point, releasing them, and then steering. Now, in truth, that isn't actually a typical approach among less experienced riders, mainly because they won't have that level of confidence to use hard brakes or get to hard brakes quickly. Ordinarily, newer riders will be at the other end of that scale, with the issues starting from the very beginning of their braking effort in their throttle to brakes transition. For learning riders, the way they transition from the throttle to the brakes is often not so good. Quite simply, it's lazy. A common trait you'll see is that riders will roll off and spend a considerable length of time coasting along without either the throttle or brakes applied. And rolling off early like this shows that the rider is unsure of themselves or what they need to be doing as they move into the braking zone. And as you would expect, this has an impact on their performance through that zone and how they perform their braking from that point forward. Because they've rolled off so early, they find themselves a long way away from the corner with no immediate feeling that they need to brake to any large degree for the upcoming corner. As such, they'll start off with light brakes simply because they don't feel the need to use more than that. However, as they get closer to the corner, they start to get the feeling that they're going a bit too fast. So they gradually build up the brake pressure as they get closer and closer to the turn point. The end result is that the rider will find themselves hard on the brakes at or near the point where they want to enter the corner. And this creates a whole manner of unpleasant feelings and possibly some unfavourable results like overbraking or missing their turn point altogether. But what are the downsides of this approach? Aside from the negative results that come from being hard on the brakes when you want to begin steering and entering the corner, this light to hard braking approach makes it difficult for riders to improve in the braking zone itself. The biggest difficulty comes from the fact that riders don't actually realise what they're doing, and because they find themselves hard on the brakes and feeling rushed at corner entry, they feel like they're braking late enough already. The result is that while they may want to brake later, they come around again and are met with the same lack of confidence and find themselves rolling off too early again and being unsure of themselves in that braking zone. To combat this and in turn make massive progress in the braking zone, we have to turn this approach on its head. This is actually something we've covered in a previous video, so I won't go too deep on it here, but we're simply looking to turn this approach on its head and get the bulk of the braking done earlier in the braking zone and taper the brakes off on the approach instead of increasing them. And like many things you'll learn on this channel, this was also a eureka moment for me. I was one of many who, unbeknown to me, adopted the approach of building up the brake pressure slowly and leaving the hard braking until later in the braking zone. But after it was brought to my attention and I was taught the correct braking structure, it was a complete revelation for me. Particularly in heavy braking areas, I found that once I adopted the technique of starting with hard braking, I was left feeling like I was starting my braking effort far too early. As a result of this change, I was able to move my braking points considerably closer to the corner and cut good chunks out of my lap times. Not only that, but I felt more calm, controlled and relaxed at my entry point, having finished all my hard braking earlier, away from the point where I wanted to begin steering. So how do we begin to improve in this area? Well, first you need to pay attention to what you're already doing. This trait will be displayed by so many riders across any track day paddock, and not just exclusively in the lower groups. Even in the fast group, I occasionally get caught out by riders who start braking lighter but then build up the pressure the closer they get to the corner, leaving me getting a little too close for comfort when I see the closing speed ramping up quickly. But like I said, many riders displaying this trait won't even be aware that it's a mistake they're making, which is why you need to be receptive to exactly what you're doing in the braking zone itself if it's an area you don't feel confident in. If you discover that you are in fact displaying the poor technique we looked at earlier, just by changing when you perform your hard braking, it's not out of the question that you can begin to brake later and feel more composed as you enter the corner too. Has hard braking in particular been a struggle for you as you've worked to improve on the track? Tell us about it in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, then please hit the button and subscribe to the channel for more performance riding advice and guides moving forward. See you in the next one.